Hey everyone, Steve here, and welcome to day 27 of my journey into crypto. And today I want to talk about research and more specifically, how to do it, how to create a framework for yourself where you can research a project and feel a little bit more comfortable before you start spending money on it. And I've talked to a lot of people throughout the last almost 30 days about crypto, any chance I can get. And the conversations range from people who are huge fans of anything crypto, and it doesn't matter. They're just huge fans. They're going to be giant proponents of it, to other people who are hugely skeptical of the whole notion of cryptocurrency. And they think anything related to that is a Ponzi scheme or some type of pyramid scheme. And then there's everybody else in the middle who just, they don't know where to start and they're nervous. And I started thinking about how do I go about it? And what have I learned in the last 26 or so days about how to evaluate a project? And remember, I started at zero at the beginning of this. So I created my own framework for how I look at projects going forward. And I want to share that with you. So today's topic is do your own research. And you'll see this acronym all the time in the decentralized community, DOYR. And let's get into what that means. So 3 steps is how I like to think about most topics. And where I start when I'm trying to do some research on any new project or any new chain or any new distributed application, I always start with a broad review. And if I get really interested, I go a little bit deeper and I'll read the white papers, I'll read the FAQs, or the formal documentation they have. And then if I'm really interested and want to spend some time on it, or if I'm preparing a presentation like this, I go into the communities. And typically that means Discord, not always, but that's where I go. So let's get into what this really means. So a broad review for me is, what are other people talking about? I'll do a Google search. I'll look and see if there's a roadmap that's been published. And if it's a new blockchain, for example, I like to look at who are the investors. And this is where you can get a clue about whether this is something that's going to be fairly significant, because not only are people putting their money into it, but they're putting their reputation. So there are some big Silicon Valley type investors with really large funds, and they're putting their name behind it. And they're also stating publicly what their expectations are. So if you follow Avalanche, for example, or maybe Olympus DAO, there are some well-known investors who talk about what their priorities are. And they talk about their priorities for return on investment in the range of 10 plus years. So you know that they're looking for a long-term investment. They're more interested in growing the ecosystem rather than turning around in 18 months. So that's one way you can get a sense of whether this is a short-term scam, or maybe not a scam is the right word, but if you're thinking about a new chain or new network, is it a short-term effort that may not be backed by enough deep pockets to give them a long-term runway? Or is it something that's just somebody's got a good idea, like some of the video games out there where they did have a good idea, they implemented it, but they don't have any indicators of a long-term commitment? So that's what I'm getting at when I think about who are the investors. And then if I'm really getting into it, I'll do a deeper dive and I'll start reading the white paper. So a good example of that for this, 30-day project is I had to learn how to stake time in the Wonderland.money app. And I read through their white papers. I've read through them multiple times because it took a while to make sense of it. Some of the questions I started asking myself are, is this super subjective because these white papers are written by the project owners? Is the information relevant? Is it updated? Is it timely? Some other projects, you'll see that the white papers are not always updated as a project continues. And the reason is because they probably wrote these white papers at the beginning time frame of the project. They may not update everything as they go. And how detailed is the planning? And typically I've found that the ones that I've been involved in, the planning is pretty detailed. They'll give you a roadmap. They'll give you dates and timelines for when things will be done. And then finally, if I'm really interested, I will join the communities. And specifically, I use Discord. I have found this to be one of the better apps for digging into it. And I think most of these blockchain projects will use Discord because it's an easy way to have a protected community with forums and lots of questions. So Discord is something I highly recommend you engage in. If you haven't used Discord before, don't be worried about that. There's a lot of easy ways to learn how to use it. And I may follow up with another video on this if there's interest. Most people know Discord if they come from the gaming community, because that's one of the places where Discord became really popular and really useful. But one thing I really like about Discord is they have timely information. So there are a lot of updates that show up in Discord that may not show up in the white papers or the FAQs or the blog pages on the main website pages. You'll see links to software repositories. You'll see links to the contract addresses. So you'll get a lot of official information from within the Discord community. Another really good example is you'll get information about known scams. If you're really interested in investing, reading through some of these known scams will help you stay alert and be aware of how to avoid those type of scams. So there's a lot of really timely education that comes in the form of the Discord community. Now, the only bad part about it is there's a lot of people join the Discord community. A lot of these are automated bots that come in. And despite the best efforts at removing bots that are automated, they still get in and they can share false information, but they have pretty good moderators, especially in the better known projects. They have moderators who weed these out. So I have found Discord to be a huge benefit of learning the details of how to navigate through some of these projects. Now, I'll show you some examples of how I've gone through this and some of the projects I've looked at. So 3 I'm going to share with you today are the Avalanche Network, and I've got a typo that should be AVAX, Helium Network. And this is one I'm very interested in because it has to do with Internet of Things. And obviously because I spent a lot of time trying to learn how to stake time in the Wonderland.money app, I'm going to show what I've looked at in their whole ecosystem of documentation. Here is a really good example of external press talking about Avalanche. And this is an article, I just Googled it, but you can see if you read through these type of articles, you'll see that they have attracted a large series of investments. And the big promise behind Avalanche is that it's a alternative to the Ethereum network with higher transaction speeds and lower transaction costs. And there's a lot of money coming in, not only to support the blockchain itself and the development of that, but also the apps that are compatible on that blockchain. So that's one way if you're just thinking about where should I spend my money? Which blockchain should I spend time in? And where should I buy currency? And which app should I use? And that's a big question. If you've got a limited amount of funds, which direction do you go? So Avalanche was one that I looked at early on, and I decided this was a good one for me. And if you really want to go deeper, you can start looking into their documentation. And here's a good example. It's showing all of the roadmap for all of 2021 and then milestones that they've met. And you can look into the details of these. It just goes on and on. Of course, their white papers show you how to do all the staking. So this is just a good example of how to get a deep dive into these communities. And then if you really want to get into the actual social communities, there's always the hub or some type of link where they talk about communities. And that's a good example for Avalanche. Now, Helium is one that I talked about earlier in this journey. And I'm really interested in this because I want to do some type of mining to participate in this Internet of Things network. So I spent a lot of time going into the details of this. And one thing that really caught my eye early on is here's an example of an investor in the form of a partner. Dish is a very well-known brand. They have their own 5G network that they're launching to support their subscription-based television system. And they're participating with Helium. So that's big news on its own because it's an external validation. So I'm pretty comfortable with this project. It's already grown so much. It's going to continue to grow. And there is a very long runway in front of it. And there's a lot of ways to participate in it. And for me specifically, I dug into the documentation to learn how can I get access to a hardware device that's going to allow me to mine. And it's really difficult to get one. However, by reading through this, I learned that they have data-only hotspots. This was buried in the documentation. So now I'm in the process of acquiring data-only hotspots and activating these on the network. So that's something I'll be talking about in the future when I get this done. But I found this only because I dug into the documentation This is one of those examples where on the top level, this wasn't obvious on the front pages. Once you got into the documentation, I saw that they had references to it. And then I looked into the roadmap and I saw that the data only hotspots had been achieved as a milestone. So I know it's possible now, but it wasn't front and center on the top web pages. So here's an example where you really have to go deep if you want to participate, and you're going to find information that's not always on the most public facing page. Now, finally, I want to talk about Wonderland and the Wonderland.money app. Really easy to get into their documentation just by clicking that link right there. And then you can go into the FAQs and learn all the things that I talked about already with how it works. Because I was putting money into it, I was really curious, but also I was curious because there's a lot of similarities between how this staking application works and how other applications work on other networks. So I wanted to find some commonalities because I think there's going to be similarities across all networks with how these apps work. So I want to get really smart at how this one works so I can understand how they measure the return, the percentage yield, all those things. Everybody uses different terminology, but when you start to see the similarities, you'll understand how they work on different networks. You'll see that these white papers will have the official links to all the contract addresses. So this is another thing to get comfortable with. And you'll also notice that they will share the actual open source software code that was developed behind these contracts on GitHub. I'm not a developer, but if you are, this would be obviously the place that you would go look to get a better understanding of how these contracts are developed and the language that they use, in this case, Solidity. So you can really dig into it there. So there is a lot of information. And again, the theme is starting out broad. As you get interested, go deeper. Finally, I want to bring up Discord, because when you get into the communities, now you can start really getting a sense of where the details are. I'm just going to share this one quick example, but this is a Helium community. This is their server over here on the left. And I'm on the chat room of known scammers. This is updated just in late December. And this is really helpful because there are a lot of scams occurring of people replicating websites, using websites that have, very similar names to them. And the whole goal is to get people to get things from these websites, install an app that has malicious code in it, and it's designed to steal or get you to connect your wallet and somehow designed to steal tokens or something of that. So either way, getting involved in the Discord community will not only help you become educated, you'll stay current with what's happening. You can spend a lot of time here, but this goes to a level that's so much deeper than what you'll see on a website and the white papers. So this is where I encourage you, if you're really getting interested in this, in any type of project, go into the Discord communities, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask a dumb one. You'll probably get a lot of sarcastic responses, but you'll also learn, and that's the best way to do it. So that is what I wanted to share today. I hope that this helps you get over any reservations, any concerns, any fear that you have about getting involved in some type of decentralized app, crypto project, whatever you want to call it. Take the step, learn how to do it. I think just the more comfortable you'll feel with taking that first few steps. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to put them in the comments. I look forward to next time, and we'll talk to you soon.